The sun baked the polished stone steps of the Hawthorne Elite Shooting Range, the Texas air thick with the scent of heat and gun oil. Alyssa King stood at the heavy iron gates, her worn brown leather jacket clashing against the tailored sportswear streaming past her. Her hands, steady and calloused from years of work, rested lightly on the aged rifle slung over her shoulder, a relic of another time, another fight. A low chuckle rolled from the reception booth, where a man in a gleaming navy uniform leaned lazily against the counter. His smile was sharp, condescending, practiced. "Lost, sweetheart," he called out, his voice slicing through the quiet. Alyssa didn't flinch. She took a step forward, her boots scuffing against the smooth pavement. Behind her, a boy barely out of high school elbowed his friend, his designer sunglasses sliding down his nose. "Look at that old thing she's carrying," he snickered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like museum trash." "Maybe they're letting in maintenance staff now," another voice chimed in. "VIP janitors. Cute." Laughter pealed across the entrance like a gunshot. Dozens of eyes turned toward Alyssa, sizing her up, dismissing her. Phones were already out, screens tilted just enough to capture her faded jacket, her scuffed boots, the rifle that didn't gleam under the sun the way theirs did. Alyssa felt the heat of their stares, but kept walking. Her face was calm, almost detached, as if she were passing through fog, untouched by their noise. At the gate, the receptionist leaned forward, his hand hovering mockingly over the scanner. "VIP lanes aren't for charity cases," he said, voice dripping with disdain. "Maybe you're looking for the community center down the road." The boy with the sunglasses snapped a picture, his caption ready before the shutter clicked. "Maintenance girl at the VIP range." A ripple of amusement rolled through the growing crowd. Alyssa said nothing. She simply reached into her jacket and pulled out a card, battered at the edges, but unmistakably official. A dark blue VIP pass, the seal of a retired major general gleaming faintly under the afternoon sun. The receptionist's smirk faltered. His fingers brushed the scanner with theatrical reluctance. The machine beeped green. Silence, for just a heartbeat. Alyssa stepped through, her boots crossing the invisible line between the privileged and the unwelcome. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Their laughter followed her like a sour wind. Inside the lobby, the noise shifted. Plush leather chairs, mahogany counters, crystal-clean glass walls, all of it gleamed with money and legacy. Every head turned toward the anomaly walking in. First, confusion. Then, the recognition of her jacket, her rifle. And finally, the laughter again. Louder, crueler. Somebody whistled low. "Guess janitors get target practice too now," someone muttered near the espresso bar. Alyssa's fingers brushed the strap of her rifle once, an almost invisible movement. Her face was unreadable, her gaze pinned to the distant shooting lanes stretching out under skylights and gold-plated scoreboards. Behind her, the receptionist's voice drifted toward the group still watching from the entrance. "Probably a mistake. She won't last long." Another round of chuckles answered him. Phones went up again. Live streams buzzed to life. Comments flooded in, "Lost and found at the range." "Watch her trip before she even loads the gun." VIP welfare showcase. But Alyssa kept walking. One step, then another. The weight of history on her back, heavier than the rifle. The weight of eyes trying to bury her before she even took her first shot. None of it touched her. The scanner had beeped green. That was all that mattered. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind Alyssa King, muffling the jeers, but their echoes clung to her like smoke. Inside, the air was cooler, sharp with gun oil and polished marble. Every footstep tapped against the pristine black floors, sounding too loud in the hush of judgment. She paused near the lounge, her eyes sweeping across the opulence she had no place in. Leather couches sprawled across the lobby, where millionaires' sons lounged like royalty, rifles cradled like golden scepters. The walls gleamed with trophies, framed records, and faces grinning coldly from behind sniper scopes. She could almost hear her grandfather's gravel voice in her ear, steady as the earth. "Breathe through your boots, girl. Let them laugh. The bullet don't care who's rich." Alyssa shifted the rifle strap higher onto her shoulder. Her fingers found the worn groove near the trigger guard, polished smooth by decades of use. Her grandfather's rifle, a piece of American military history, passed down with calloused hands and quiet pride. She took another step forward. A pair of teenagers in tactical designer gear leaned against the check-in counter, pretending not to stare while their phones trembled in their hands. One snickered behind a gloved fist. "Bet that thing's older than her," he whispered, loud enough for the sound to travel. The receptionist from earlier, Derek, sauntered into the lobby with a coffee cup in hand, smirking. "Someone call maintenance?" "Think the mop girl got lost," he said, and another ripple of laughter cracked through the elite crowd. Alyssa's face stayed still, her steps even. Each movement was slow, deliberate. She had learned long ago not to rush into enemy fire. From the corner of the range, a large screen buzzed to life, displaying live feeds of the shooting lanes. Instructors, dressed in spotless polos and khaki slacks, chatted amongst themselves, some glancing up, some barely hiding their sneers. Across the lobby, a social media feed scrolled fast on a giant digital wall. "Range royalty. Top shooters this week. Legacy members only." Underneath, new comments popped up faster than the moderators could blink. "Lost girl alert. Someone get her a map. VIP mistake incoming." Phones pointed like weapons. Captions were being typed. Emojis fired like cheap ammunition. Still, Alyssa walked. At the far end of the lobby, a large bronze plaque caught her eye. Names engraved deep into metal. Founders, champions, war heroes. Men and women who'd made their names here, burned into the marble floors and gold frames. Her grandfather should have been among them. He wasn't. She would change that. She shifted the rifle again, her thumb brushing the initials carved under the barrel. TLK, Thomas Lee King. She remembered the first time she fired it. She was 8 years old, the gun heavy in her arms, the smell of the woods sharp after rain. Her grandfather had crouched beside her, one calloused hand steadying the barrel, the other patting her back after the shot rang true. "It ain't the rifle that makes the shot, little one," he had said. "It's the fire in your chest." Her heart ached with the memory, but her spine stayed straight. A group of young men swaggered past, their laughter thick and sour. One bumped into her shoulder, a deliberate nudge that rocked her off balance for a heartbeat. "Oops," he said with a mock gasp. "Didn't see the help standing there." Another voice, dripping with fake concern, added, "Careful, darling. Wouldn't want you to trip and scratch the marble." Snickers followed them as they melted into the crowd. Alyssa adjusted her jacket and kept walking, her hands light on the rifle, her breathing even. She didn't rise to bait. She had learned better in tougher places than this. At a gleaming glass desk labeled VIP Check-In, an older woman with a stiff bun and a sharper smile looked her up and down. You're here for the demonstration? The woman asked, skepticism thick in her tone. Alyssa said nothing. She only slid her grandfather's VIP pass across the counter. The woman's eyes flicked over it, her smile tightening. "Lane 8, she said, tapping a screen without looking up. "Try not to cause distractions." Another quiet jab. Alyssa picked up her pass, turned on her heel, and walked toward lane 8 without a word. Behind her, whispers rose again, punctuated by stifled laughter and the click of cameras. The heavy rifle rode easy on her back, its weight nothing compared to the burden in the room. Her grandfather's voice echoed again in her mind, strong and sure. "Make 'em watch, girl. Then make 'em remember." She passed under the giant Hawthorne Elite sign, the letters cold and indifferent overhead. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make history. The range stretched out before Alyssa like a battlefield, all polished chrome and steel under skylights that burned down mercilessly. 50-meter lanes separated by glass panels, pristine targets pinned at the far end. Every surface gleamed. Every lane was a monument to wealth and pedigree. And Alyssa King, in her scuffed boots and faded jacket, was a crack running through their perfect glass world. The moment she set foot on the firing line, the room buzzed louder. Phones went up again, live streams catching her every step. Behind her, a group lounged across designer leather chairs, their rifles resting casually in velvet-lined racks. A boy in a crisp navy blazer, no older than 20, leaned over to his friend, grinning wide enough to flash a row of perfect teeth. "Someone tell Goodwill their donation wandered off," he said, laughing. His friend snapped a photo of Alyssa adjusting the strap on her old rifle. "VIP Lane's new cleaning lady." The caption read, "Already blowing up on their feeds." The laughter wasn't hidden anymore. It rang out openly, bouncing off the glass, sharp and cutting. Alyssa ignored it. At lane 7, a tall blonde woman with an expensive custom rifle leaned casually against her shooting bench. Madison Green. Her family name was stitched onto the butt of her gun in gold thread. She watched Alyssa with the cold amusement of a queen surveying a beggar. "You're wasting everyone's time, sweetheart," Madison said loud enough for the entire lounge to hear. "There's a soup kitchen 2 blocks down. Might find better company there." Snickers rolled through the spectators. Alyssa didn't blink. She set her rifle down, unzipped her bag, and began setting up. Calm. Mechanical. As if their words were nothing but dust in the air. From the instructor's booth, 2 men leaned over the railing, watching her every move. Coach Davenport, a grizzled ex-captain with arms crossed tight over his chest, turned to his assistant. "She's either stubborn or stupid," he muttered, voice thick with disdain. "VIPs don't come dressed like that." Another chuckle from the assistant, who leaned closer to the glass, tapping his finger against the pane like Alyssa was some exhibit at a zoo. At the far end of the lounge, near the espresso machine, a familiar voice sliced through the din. "Bet she couldn't hit the broadside of a barn," said Tyler Reed, son of a Texas oil magnate, his sneakers probably worth more than Alyssa's entire life savings. He raised his coffee cup in mock salute. "Go get 'em, janitor." The crowd roared with laughter again, some slapping their knees, others filming the moment for later reposts. Alyssa chambered around with quiet efficiency, her fingers steady. She could feel the stairs drilling into her back, the weight of 100 judgments, but she moved like water around rocks, untouched. From the shadows of the VIP lounge, a heavier presence approached. Colonel Victor Barnes, Hawthorne's director and a legend among marksmen, stepped up to the glass overlooking the lanes. His silver hair gleamed under the recessed lights. His gaze was razor-sharp, assessing, unimpressed. He leaned toward the microphone that broadcast across the range. "Attention," he said, his voice carrying like a shot across a valley. "Elite lanes are reserved for certified, vetted competitors. Please respect the integrity of this institution." The message wasn't subtle. The message was Alyssa. Behind her, a slow hand clap started, deliberate, mocking, from the boys sprawled on the leather couches. Madison smirked as she loaded her rifle. "She'll fold before the first round's over," she said confidently. A kid live-streaming from the corner typed furiously into his phone. "Watch this train wreck in real time. Ça VIP fail. Gérant, maintenance shooter." Alyssa's hands moved without hesitation, setting up her stance, adjusting her sights. Her breathing was a steady rhythm in her ears. Her grandfather's voice again, a low whisper cutting through the noise. "A soldier doesn't answer to cowards. She answers to the shot." Another nudge at the edge of her awareness. Derek, the smug receptionist, sauntered past the lanes, his coffee in one hand, fake sympathy dripping from his grin. "You sure you know which end of that thing fires, darling?" he said, and a few behind him chuckled. Alyssa's eyes stayed forward, locked on the target 50 meters out. She didn't speak. She didn't react. She was a stone in their river, unbending, unbroken. Coach Davenport exchanged a look with Colonel Barnes, both shaking their heads. In their minds, she was already a ghost, a punchline that hadn't even played out yet. But Alyssa knew better. Her hands tightened around the grip of the rifle, feeling every worn groove, every scar. Her heart beat slow and certain, syncing with the pulse of the earth itself. They could laugh. They could sneer. They could live stream every second. But they couldn't stop her from pulling the trigger when the time came. And when that moment arrived, the world they knew, the one built on sneers and gold-plated arrogance, would never be the same again. The crack of gunfire echoed down the range, crisp and arrogant, as Ethan Carter adjusted the cuffs of his custom-fitted tactical jacket. Every movement he made looked rehearsed, calculated. His rifle, a $60,000 custom sniper piece, gleamed under the lights like a trophy. He glanced sideways at Alyssa, his grin lazy and sharp. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" he said, loud enough for the entire range to hear. Chuckles followed like obedient echoes. Alyssa didn't turn. She continued setting her stance at lane 8, the old wood of her rifle catching the light, looking every bit out of place among the polished carbon fiber and titanium weapons around her. Ethan slung his rifle over one shoulder with theatrical flair and swaggered toward her. "I'll make it interesting for you," he said, voice dripping with mock kindness. "1 round, 10 shots each. You beat me, I'll walk out of this place and never show my face again." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, but making sure others still caught every word. "But if you lose, you pack up that antique and crawl back to wherever you came from." The crowd stirred, phones tilted upward, ready to catch every humiliating second. Madison Green called out from her lane, laughing. "Hope you brought tissues, honey. It's gonna be messy." Colonel Barnes, arms crossed behind the glass, said nothing. His jaw tightened, the disdain obvious on his face. Alyssa finally turned to face Ethan, her hazel eyes locked onto his with a calm so pure it made him hesitate for just half a heartbeat. "No prizes for second place," she said simply. Her voice wasn't raised, wasn't angry. It was steady, certain. And somehow, that shook him more than any insult could have. Ethan barked a short laugh, trying to shake the sudden chill in his gut. "You're on, janitor," he said, backing toward lane 7. Someone in the lounge whooped, "Trash talk from maintenance. Love it." The live stream chat exploded. "She's gonna eat dirt. Someone record this meltdown." VIP clown show today. Alyssa checked her sights, breathing in slow, deep pulls. Around her, the laughter grew softer, shifting from casual mockery to a sharper, hungrier edge. They didn't just want her to lose. They needed her to fail. Anything less would threaten the careful lie they all lived inside, that money, status, and bloodlines guaranteed superiority. Ethan loaded his rifle with a dramatic click, turning to flash a cocky grin at the crowd. "Don't blink, sweetheart," he said. He stepped into position at lane 7, settling in with the ease of someone who'd been doing this since he could walk. Alyssa slid a single round into her rifle. The old mechanism groaned slightly, a noise so out of place in the sterilized hum of the range that a few nearby laughed again. Coach Davenport leaned toward Colonel Barnes behind the glass. "This won't take long," he muttered. Barnes didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on Alyssa, something unreadable flashing in them. Across the firing lanes, instructors took positions behind glass partitions, ready to observe what they assumed would be a one-sided slaughter. The signal light blinked yellow. Ready. The entire range seemed to hold its breath. Ethan grinned and threw a wink toward the live cameras. "Ready to get schooled, little lady," he said. Alyssa said nothing. The signal light turned green. The match had begun. Ethan fired first, his rifle bucking lightly against his shoulder. The scoreboard above flashed. "Pattu pulli pugiam." The lounge erupted in applause. He fired again. "Devyati veresnya." Another cheer. By his 5th shot, he was stringing together near-perfect scores, his grouping so tight it looked almost surgical. The comments exploded. "Elite level only. She's toast. Send her back to the soup kitchen." Alyssa waited. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her turn would come. And when it did, the shot would speak louder than any of their laughter. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. Ethan's fans leaned forward, phones trembling in eager hands. 10 shots. One woman with an old rifle. One stage built on centuries of arrogance. And before the sun set on that range, something none of them expected would leave them gasping for air. Ethan stepped back from the line, his rifle lowered casually at his side, a smirk stitched onto his face. His final score blinked above the lanes. 9.9, 10.0, 9.8, 9.9, 10.0, 9.9, 10.0, 9.7, 9.9, 10.0. A near-flawless performance. Enough to crown him king again, enough to bury her. The crowd roared with approval. Phones tilted upward, capturing his victorious stride as he flashed the cameras a cocky, 2-fingered salute. He turned back toward Alyssa with a grin so wide it hurt to look at. "Your turn, sweetheart," he called. "Try not to embarrass yourself too bad." The words floated through the air, thick with poison. Alyssa King adjusted the strap on her rifle, letting the weight settle across her shoulders. She stepped up to the line, boots steady, breath even. The old rifle in her hands gleamed faintly under the overhead lights, its worn stock a quiet reminder of the battles it had survived. The room shifted. The laughter softened. Somehow, in that moment, even the phones seemed to hesitate. The range instructor raised the flag. The signal light blinked green. Alyssa exhaled once. Then she fired. Ping. The board flashed, "Pattu pulli pujyam." A few murmurs. Someone coughed nervously. Maybe luck, they told themselves. Alyssa reloaded smoothly, almost lazily. Second shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." The room grew quieter, a low hum of confusion beginning to spread. Ethan's grin slipped just a fraction. Madison Green frowned, adjusting her designer scope. Alyssa shifted her stance, her braid brushing lightly against her jacket. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at Ethan. Her world was a tight tunnel, nothing but her and the red dot 50 meters out. Third shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." The range's automatic congratulatory melody played softly, a rare tune reserved for triple perfects. Usually, cause for celebration. Today, it sounded like a warning. Coach Davenport stiffened behind the observation glass. Colonel Barnes narrowed his eyes, arms unfolding slowly. Fourth shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." Now the whispering started. Phones were lowered slightly. Chairs shifted. The energy in the room flipped from mocking to unsettled. Fifth shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." A headset clattered to the floor near the instructor's booth, dropped by a stunned trainee. Sixth shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." Ethan's jaw tightened. His earlier swagger drained from his face like color from a washed-out photo. Madison cursed under her breath, adjusting her scope again even though she wasn't the one shooting. Seventh shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." Someone dropped their phone in the back. No one laughed. No one clapped. The air thickened, almost suffocating now. The very walls seemed to lean inward, drawn toward the storm building at Lane 8. Eighth shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." Madison ripped off her shooting glasses and threw them onto the bench beside her, the sharp crack making heads turn. Tyler Reed stood frozen halfway to his chair, his drink dripping unnoticed onto his sneakers. Ninth shot. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." Colonel Barnes leaned forward, both hands pressed hard against the glass. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Ethan swallowed hard, sweat dotting his brow despite the cool air conditioning. Final shot. 10th shot. Alyssa exhaled so slowly it barely stirred the hair at her temple. She squeezed the trigger. Time seemed to break apart into fragments. Ping. "Pattu pulli pujyam." The final score flashed bright and merciless across the massive scoreboard. 100 divided by 100. New facility record. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the faint hum of the target retrieval system as Alyssa's shot pattern was pulled back toward the shooting line. When the paper sheet arrived, gasps broke loose. 10 shots, one on top of the other. A single ragged hole dead center of the bullseye. Not a millimeter wasted. Not a shot out of place. The silence cracked first in the back rows, a shuffling of feet, then spread forward in a wave of stunned disbelief. Ethan stood there, arms limp at his sides, mouth slightly open, staring at the board like it had betrayed him personally. Madison backed away slowly, as if trying to melt into the walls. The live-stream chat exploded. "Who is she?" "This is insane!" "Forget Ethan. She's the real legend." Black Queen energy. Respect. Colonel Barnes straightened up behind the glass, a slow smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Coach Davenport muttered under his breath, his face pale. That wasn't supposed to happen. But it had. and nothing at Hawthorne Elite Range would ever be the same again. Alyssa King lowered her rifle slowly, resting it against her hip, her face still unreadable, still silent. The laughter was dead. The arrogance was dead. And for the first time that day, the billionaires and bloodlines of Hawthorne Elite understood exactly what real power looked like. It didn't come from money. It didn't come from privilege. It came from the girl they tried to bury, and who had just written her name across their history books in bullet holes and fire. For a long moment after the final shot, the world inside Hawthorne Elite Range held its breath. Then, like a dam breaking, everything shifted. Colonel Barnes moved first. He stepped away from the observation booth and strode onto the range, his boots striking the marble with a thunderous certainty. Behind him, coaches and staff scrambled to keep up, but the look in his eyes made it clear. No one else was in charge now. The crowd parted before him, their earlier arrogance collapsing into stunned, shame-faced silence. Barnes stopped directly in front of Alyssa. He looked at her, really looked at her, the battered jacket, the old rifle, the steady hands, and nodded once, slow and deliberate. He turned to face the spectators. "This young lady," he said, his voice amplified through the lounge speakers, "has just set a new facility record. A perfect 100. The words hung in the air like a verdict. A slow murmur rippled through the room, disbelief shifting into a heavy, choking shame. Madison Green, who had been standing tall a moment ago, dropped her gaze to the floor, cheeks burning. Tyler Reed slumped against a chair, his drink long forgotten at his feet. Barnes didn't wait for the muttering to settle. He pointed toward Derek, the receptionist who had first mocked Alyssa at the gate. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Collect your things." Derek's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He opened his mouth to protest, but saw Barnes's eyes and thought better of it. Head down, he stumbled away toward the staff hallway. Coach Davenport was next. "Your conduct toward a verified VIP guest is under formal review," Barnes continued, voice like steel. "Until then, you're relieved of duty." Davenport's clipboard slipped from his hand and clattered loudly on the polished floor. Phones were still up, but now they captured a different kind of story. No longer the humiliation of a black woman stepping where she wasn't supposed to. Now they captured the crumbling of a system that had protected the privileged and mocked the worthy. At the edge of the range, a few younger shooters, kids who had laughed the loudest earlier, shuffled awkwardly, eyes on their shoes. From the speakers overhead, a different tone rang out, the official ceremonial chime of Hawthorne Elite, reserved for champions. The massive LED scoreboard refreshed, and a new digital plaque appeared. Alyssa King, record holder, 100 out of 100, facility champion. Applause started hesitantly from the back. One pair of hands, clapping slow, unsure. Then another. Then a few more. And finally, the entire lounge erupted into applause. Awkward, stumbling at first, but growing, swelling, filling the high ceilings with a sound that no amount of privilege could fake. Ethan Carter remained frozen at his lane, rifle forgotten on the bench. His eyes locked onto Alyssa, searching for something. Anger, maybe, or triumph, or arrogance. But Alyssa's face held none of those things. She simply stood there, rifle slung over her shoulder, breathing steady, eyes calm, as if the storm she had unleashed was just a ripple on a quiet pond. Colonel Barnes approached again and offered his hand. "On behalf of Hawthorne Elite," he said, his voice thick with something that almost sounded like pride, "we welcome you." And we apologize. Alyssa looked at the hand for a long second. Then she shifted her rifle slightly, freeing her right hand, and shook his. The applause swelled louder, rising to meet her, washing over the walls that had once seemed so impenetrable. Not everyone clapped. Madison Green slipped out a side door, her designer rifle clutched tight, her head bowed low. Tyler Reed slinked into the lounge shadows, pretending to check his phone. The ones who had built their pride on her humiliation couldn't meet her eyes now. They were too busy drowning in their own. Near the entrance, a security guard quietly took down the VIP members-only sign that had stood for years without challenge. In its place, he posted a new notice: Skill recognized, not status. Alyssa caught a glimpse of it as she turned toward the lobby, the sunlight outside blazing like a welcome match she had carved out for herself. Behind her, the lounge still buzzed with disbelief, with murmured apologies, with stunned admiration. Ahead of her, the world cracked open, wider and freer than it had been when she first walked through those heavy gates. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to boast. The shots had spoken, and everyone, every last billionaire, every last bloodline loyalist, had heard them loud and clear. The Texas sun was sinking low by the time Alyssa King stepped out of Hawthorne Elite, her boots crunching lightly against the gravel. The sky above stretched wide and burning orange, like a battlefield after the fight had ended. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Inside those gleaming walls, her name now lived. Not because of who her family was, not because of the color of her skin, but because of what she had done, what she had proven. In her jacket pocket, folded carefully, was the certificate they had rushed to prepare. Facility record holder, 100 out of 100, Alyssa King. She hadn't smiled when they handed it to her. She had only nodded once, steady and proud. At her truck, she paused, resting the rifle gently across the passenger seat. Her hand lingered on the worn wood of the stock, tracing the initials carved there decades ago. TLK Thomas Lee King. Her grandfather's voice seemed to ride the wind that swept across the empty lot. "Make 'em remember your name, baby girl." She sat behind the wheel for a long moment, letting the weight of the day settle deep into her bones. A quiet strength, not fireworks. Victory didn't need noise. Victory needed only truth. From inside her jacket, she pulled out a small, faded photograph. Her grandfather in uniform, one hand resting proudly on a rifle, the same rifle now sitting beside her. She smiled, a real smile, small but unshakable, and set the photo carefully on the dashboard where it caught the dying light. Around her, the world was already moving on. Inside the range, instructors whispered urgently. Bosses argued. Policies were rewritten. Online, the live streams exploded across the country, USA, UK, Canada, the hashtags burning through the charts. Alyssa King. Black excellence. Breaking barriers. Justice served. Comments flooded in. She changed the game. Skill over status. Every time. True American legend in action. None of that touched Alyssa now. She didn't need their words. She had carried her truth into their world like a matchstick into a dry forest, and watched it burn down the lies. A tap on her window broke her thoughts. She turned to find Ethan Carter standing there, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, his earlier bravado stripped away. He looked different now, smaller, realer. He nodded once, almost awkwardly. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You didn't just beat me. You destroyed everything we thought mattered." Alyssa studied him for a moment, the man who had challenged her, mocked her, underestimated her. She opened the door slowly, stepping out into the cooling air. "You ever want to really win something, Ethan?" she said, her voice calm and strong. "Start by respecting what you can't understand." Ethan's jaw worked, emotions flickering behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded again. "I'm sorry," he said simply, and she believed him. Without another word, Alyssa slid back into the truck, the engine rumbling to life under her steady hands. As she pulled away, the range faded behind her, just another building swallowed by the twilight. Ahead of her, the open road stretched wide, endless. She didn't know exactly where she was going next. Maybe another range. Maybe another fight. Maybe just home. But wherever it was, she would carry the memory of this day with her. Not the insults, not the humiliation, but the victory carved clean through the middle of all their noise. She would carry her grandfather's lessons in every step, every shot, every breath, and somewhere down the line, maybe some little girl with a hand-me-down rifle and a fire in her chest would hear the story of Alyssa King, the black woman who walked into a world built to keep her out, and wrote her name across its foundations in gunfire and steel. Alyssa smiled to herself, the horizon burning gold ahead. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning.